that the FBI is doing.
Now, Congressman, Director Wray and AG Garland, they have claimed on the record, congressional record, that they do not retaliate against whistleblowers. Will you be calling, the committee be calling Wray and Garland back up to the Hill to say, look, this is the testimony of people that have worked for you, at least in the case of Chris Wray, and you're saying this doesn't happen? How does that square against what these guys who came about, by the way, and went to Capitol Hill despite death threats and despite the fact that retaliation will happen if it hasn't happened already? I would wonder if Chris Wray is coming back to the Hill anytime soon.
Well, I'm sure that that's on the plans for Chair Jordan, because we have other people that testified as well that are FBI whistleblowers that weren't willing to, they were so afraid of what was going to happen to them and being treated the way that these witnesses were treated by the Democrats that they didn't want to publicly speak. So we have even more than just the four or the three that testify. There's like 24 that have come forward. So I certainly hope that's the case. I signed on. If I haven't done it yet, we're going to sign on to an impeachment on Wray and impeachment on Garland for a number of different factors. But from the mere fact that they testified to Congress that they're not going to go after whistleblowers and retaliate, and you had direct evidence that that's exactly what's happening in the FBI and the DOJ.
It is disturbing, and here you have an FBI that has really weighed into and impacted and perhaps changed in their actions the last two outcomes of the 2016 and 2020 presidential elections. And we're talking to Congressman Greg Steube. I wonder what happens from here as far as reforming the FBI. And the efforts from the GOP House are admirable in terms of finally looking into all these allegations and bringing forth actual whistleblowers, actual witnesses in these situations. But it must frustrate you to a certain point, Congressman, as far as then you turn on the evening news, ABC, CBS, NBC, you turn on other networks not called Fox, and suddenly no one's talking about any of this testimony, or if they are downplaying it or dismissing it and mocking it. So it's hard to get traction in these situations when you have a media that is serving at the pleasure of the Democratic Party and therefore is not covering these hearings with remotely the vigor that they did during the last Congress.
Well, I believe we have to use the power that we have in the House that the American people have given us to completely reform the FBI. And the way you do that is through the appropriations process. FISA is up for reauthorization in the next year. We don't reauthorize FISA. We don't reauthorize the FISA court. We start going after these certain entities that have been created by the FBI internally, and you defund them. You defund these different organizations to send a very strong message that we're not going to stand for this type of activity. We're not going to stand for the weaponization. And the mass majority of this is coming out of Washington, D.C.'s office. And so there's a way to do that. And Jim Jordan, in a press conference that we had right before the hearing yesterday, said the same thing. He was asked the question, is this going to come with financial and reduced amounts for certain budgets for the FBI? And he simply said yes. So I think that is the only power that we have, because we don't have the Senate. So any bill that we pass to reform the FBI is going to die in the Senate, just like the immigration reform bill we passed last week is going to die in the Senate, and every of these great conservative reforms we pass in the House is going to die in the Senate. But if we use the appropriations process to start putting some pressure on them to change the behavior, it's pretty much all we can do until we elect a Republican president in 24 who can reform the whole thing.
And we're talking to Congressman Greg Steube. And yes, the 2024 election, not just about who controls the Oval Office, whether that be Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, Tim Scott. Obviously, a long way to go till Iowa, something like 8 months. And we still don't know on the Democratic side if Joe Biden will eventually make it to the finish line, whether he decides that maybe I don't want to be in the Oval Office till 86, or he's convinced not to run again because obviously his polling continues to go south as people have major concerns about not just his age is just a number, about his mental acuity. But the Senate also, Congressman, is very interesting because there are very winnable races, probably the most favorable map you'll see for the Senate in some time, where you have Montana, West Virginia, and Ohio all up for grabs. Ohio, Mike DeWine, the governor there, won by something like 24 points, right? And obviously you got Senator Vance in there now. Montana is definitely up for grabs with John Tester vulnerable. And then West Virginia with obviously... You have Manchin, who may very well jump into the presidential race for all I know. But you have Mr. Justice there, the governor. Those three, they're flipped. You win the Senate, and then things truly get done.
Yeah, and we'll at least have the House and the Senate in Republican hands. But we've got in order to really change all of this, we have to win the White House. There's so much corruption in the DOJ and the FBI over years that have occurred at these different institutions because of Democratic control in the White House. We need somebody that's going to come in, clean house in all of these places, and completely change the way that these organizations operate.
And on the endorsement front, you've endorsed President Trump. Ron DeSantis, obviously, your governor there, won by almost 20 points, one in deep blue counties, one with Hispanics and women, suburban women particularly. So when you look at this race, in the end, what made you go with the former president as opposed to the governor and DeSantis?
Well, mainly it's because President Trump is the only guy that can walk in on day one and do all the things that I just said. He's been there for 4 years. He knows exactly how things operate. He knows the mistakes that he made by putting certain people in positions that didn't do the things that he wanted them to do to root out the corruption, get rid of the people that were bad, and really institute the type of changes that need to happen. And that's the only person that can walk in on day one and do it. And on the political side, in Florida, Governor DeSantis' state, he's winning. Trump is winning by like 20 points. He's winning by 20 points in a poll I've done in my district. If you look statewide, it's all even bigger than that, sometimes 23 to 25 points. So not only from the policy side can he walk in on day one and fix all of the egregious things that the Biden administration has done, implement the America First agenda, he's also politically in the best position to do that.
Well, I certainly agree with you there. At this point right now, Donald Trump certainly with a huge lead. In terms of general election, do you believe that Donald Trump is a stronger candidate now than he was in 2016, and he could win all those folks that I just talked about, suburban women, blue dog Democrats, independents? What's the Trump message to get those folks back into his corner?
Well, if you look at the polling, the indications are there that he can. There was another poll that just came out recently, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but he was beating Joe Biden in some of these polling locations. I think the Biden administration has gone so far to the left and done so much progressive. I mean, like, you have moderate and Republican, Democratic women who probably obviously voted for Biden, but they don't want their daughters to be playing against a male in women's sports. They're going to start voting for the Republican candidate because those type of things are happening all across America. So the country has gone so far to the left. Immigration, fentanyl, Afghanistan, all these horrible crises that have been completely manufactured by the left. And the economy that Biden inherited was one of the best in our nation's history that they've destroyed. I think those moderate women, those suburban women, those independents are going to flock to President Trump simply because of how bad the policies of the Democrats are.
And that's the thing when people say, well, this will be a repeat of 2020. The argument has to be also put forth because it is a referendum on the sitting president, even though Donald Trump changes that equation a little bit. But Joe Biden has a record he has to defend now. He can't just sit in the basement and say, Donald Trump bad, vote for me because I'm a good guy. He has to defend inflation, crime, the border, foreign policy, education, all things that you just mentioned. Anyway, we're almost out of time, but I have to talk to you about this. As a former college baseball player for about 5 minutes myself, Division III, I'm not going to say that I was playing at the University of Florida or anything like that. I can't believe still, and I always wanted to talk to you about this, that you knocked a ball out of Nats Park, which is not exactly home run friendly. It's not Camden Yards. And you pitched 5 innings, 120 pitches, which no Major League Baseball player since like Nolan Ryan is throwing these days. So, I mean, that had to be like the apex as far as your athletic career. Am I wrong on that?
Well, I never thought as a member of Congress that I'd make ESPN top 10, but you hit one out of Nats Park as a member of Congress in the congressional baseball game, and suddenly you make ESPN top 10 and all these other things. It's a lot of fun. This year's game is June 14th. I'll be back on the mound again pitching for the Republicans. I'll be starting, and if the Democrats are willing to throw some strikes to me, hopefully I'll hit another one out.
Oh, God, DraftKings, please. The gods at DraftKings, let me bet on this. I mean, this is a no-brainer. I can't see it. Who the Democrats have throwing for him? Like, Eric Swalwell? I mean, this is a cakewalk. You're going to win this, I'm telling you. But anyway, happy birthday once again, sir. Enjoy. You didn't say margaritas. I believe daiquiris tonight, right? So enjoy yourself and enjoy the weekend.
All right. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Congressman.